Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me again today. This is your host, ID Jester. Welcome back to another episode of the Advanced Squad Leader Rules Set in about 15 minutes. This time we're actually going to be continuing our routing, but this time a little bit different. I'm going to call this comprehensive routing, understanding the rules. And what do I mean by that? Well, glad you asked. We can all read the rules, we can all read through the text, we can all see, I can sit here and I can explain what all the words mean and everything, but that only gives you kind of the black and white example of the rules. It doesn't give you the other part, which is what does that mean? I mean, yeah, okay, so I have 6 movement factors, I can only do this, I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. But how does that all fit inside the game and the mechanics of the game, and what is the thought process I should use when I'm analyzing my routing situation and trying to decide the best and most advantageous spots for my units. So some of this you'll learn when you play ASL, and you'll experience it and you'll see how other players are doing it. Sometimes you'll sit there and talk with other people and discuss different strategies and ask what their thoughts are or situations. So sometimes you can get this information through face-to-face or some contacts from some people you might know that know some ASL and have played some ASL. And sometimes you can get really, really lucky and have someone like me out there that's willing to sit down and actually show you what exactly the rules are talking about. So that's exactly what I'm talking about when we're talking about comprehensive routing. We're talking about, okay, now we've learned the rules. We know, we have a good understanding. Okay, we have this and this and this. Well, what does that mean? What should we look at? What should we do? What is the whole thought process? What should I try to be accomplished? What is a good play? What is a bad play? Etc. Etc. So as we've kind of been through our routing examples, hopefully you've learned the basics of the black and white, which is the actual rules, the actual routing rules, the direction your units needed to go, the differences between your 6 movement factors and your low crawl rule, your voluntary breaking of units, your disrupted units, what an open ground hex means. You know the difference of what units can route, what units can't route, what units are forced to route, what your routing movement factors are, what the process is behind moving to the closest building or wood hex, and hopefully choosing a destination hex, and of course your routing movements where you can never move closer to a known enemy unit. You cannot move into or adjacent to the same enemy unit. You don't use bypass movement, etc., etc. So hopefully the last couple episodes we've gone through that. You kind of now know the information, the black and white details of, okay, here's what the rule book says. Now what I'm hoping to do is say, okay, for an example, let's take, for those players out there that know chess, we know that the knight can move 2 spaces in one direction and 1 space in another direction. And you can read that in the chess manuals and you can understand that, but what exactly is a good play for that unit? What is its purpose out there? What can I do to help it support other units, etc., etc.? Well, that's kind of what I'm going to go through when I'm talking about comprehensive routing here. I'm going to kind of show you the information, and I'm going to talk about what's going on. I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to discuss instead of just rush through and say, okay, this unit's going to move here, and you see it's spending 1 movement factor to go to this space and another movement factor to go to this space. I'm not going to rush through to go through that. I'm going to take my time, and we're going to sit down and we're going to show you a good routing example, and we're going to talk about the different things that could possibly happen that goes on behind the scenes, what you should be thinking about. And basically, the behind the scenes, the understanding of ASL makes the difference between a good player and a bad player. Bad players know the rules, and they're moving their units around, and they're abiding by the rules, but that doesn't make them a good player. The good players are ones that understand the different phases of the game. They understand what their units can do, what they can't do. They understand where to go to make their units route more efficiently. Many games I've played against my opponents, and I see them moving their units and routing them away, and they just haphazard go. And then we get to the routing phase, and I am rallying all my guys, and they're like, well, wait a minute, why don't I get to do that? Well, you've got all your guys spread across the board. You're not having any kind of cohesive fashion. You're following the rules, but you don't understand the rules. So that's what I'm going through here. So let's look at the routing process. This is, again, behind the scenes. This is me talking with you. If you were sitting down as my playing partner, I would be discussing this with you. If you were a newbie or somebody that didn't know ASL, and you're like, hey, why don't you teach me ASL and explain to me, I would start with the rules, but I would also sit down and I would talk to you about the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about today. The routing process. When we get to the routing process, there is a step procedure you need to do. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to declare any voluntary units that are breaking. So before you start routing in your units, you have to think about any units that you want to voluntarily break. That has to come first. So you can't start routing your units and then get to a unit and go, oh, wait a minute, this guy, I want to break this guy because, no, it's too late. So you have to think about that ahead of time. First thing you want to do is always, always, always declare any voluntary units that are breaking. After that, you are going to check for removal of any disrupted units. If we look at these two sections really quickly, voluntarily break 10.41 and disruption 19.12. These are both in section A of the rule book. If we look at voluntarily break, I've highlighted the important part of that refers to the route phase. Any voluntarily break, even if pinned, at the start of the route phase, so as to be able to route during the route phase. So you can see right there in highlight that this is the first step that you must do when you get to the route phase, is you must voluntarily break anything before any routing happens. Disruption in section 19.12 of the rulebook, again I've got it highlighted in yellow there. Unless rallied by a leader first, a disrupted unit will surrender at the start of any route phase. It begins adjacent to, or during any phase it occupies the same location as a good order enemy personnel unit not in melee. So there you go, right there. It kind of talks about the route phase right there. So you're going to look at your disrupted units, see if any of them are adjacent to any enemy units. If they are, well, they're going to be removed. So those are the process there. And then, of course, once you've done number one and you've done number two, you're then going to start the routing phase of any non-disrupted units. And that process is basically an ABC as well, where you're going to declare your destination hex. Of course, you're going to follow all the routing rules we've already covered. Section B, you're going to move that unit towards the destination hex with either low crawl or your 6 movement factors. Of course, if you have a wounded leader, you only have 3 movement factors, but most times you'll have 6 movement factors. And of course, you're going to follow all the routing rules we've talked about before. And finally, part C, upon reaching your destination hex, the unit must stop its route unless you can enter an adjacent wood or building hex. Then you're going to move on and do ABC again, ABC again, ABC again for all your units that are going to route. So this is, again, the behind the scenes of what's going on with the rules and the things that you should be thinking about as an ASL player to make yourself better, to give yourself an advantage in a scenario. Number one, and most importantly, you want to keep your units alive. What does that mean? I.e., you don't want to get into a position where you will get your units eliminated for failure to route. Obviously, your units that get eliminated are bad, bad, bad. You're only going to start with a certain number of units in a scenario. If you get a whole bunch of them eliminated for failure to route, that gives you less firepower, less attacking units, less defending units that you're going to be able to do to get to your goal of winning the scenario. So keeping your units alive should be your number one goal in your routing units. Number two, get your units into a hex with a good order leader. Good order leader is a leader that is not broken. If you can get your units into a hex with a good order leader that is not broken, the next rally phase, you're going to be able to try to rally those units. If we look really quickly over here at our phase disk here, you can see in Vassal we have the German player turn, and it is the rout phase. After the rout phase will be the advance phase. After the advance phase will be the close combat phase, and then we will switch sides. The attacker will become the defender. In this case, the German player will become the defender. The American player will become the attacker, and we're going to start a new turn with the American player. And of course, you can see right here, that is the rally phase. So if you can get your units in position during the rout phase, if you can get them in position a couple more phases, you have a chance of bringing them back from being broken. So there's only 3 more phases to go, and you'll be able to try to rally these units, and if you can rally them, then they come right back. Broken units do nothing for you. So getting units into a hex with a good order leader is number 2. Reason for that is because your units will not get to self-rally unless they have a good order leader in their hex. So your leaders that are broken will get to self-rally, but all your other units, the crews, there's a couple heroes, etc. Those have a box on the back of their broken side, and basically that represents the fact that they can self-rally. There's only a few kind of units that can actually self-rally. You want to get your units into a hex with a good order leader, because any unit in a hex with a good order leader can at least attempt to rally. Number 3, get your units into a hex that give them a terrain bonus -1 to their rally attempt. And to go on with number 2 here, with a leader and a terrain bonus is even better. So get your units into a hex that's going to give them a terrain bonus. And if you can get them into a leader hex as well, that's even better. If I had a choice between trying to get my units into a good order leader hex, or to get them into a hex with a terrain bonus, I would much rather get them into a hex with a good order leader. If I can't reach a good order leader, the next thing I'm going to try to do is get them into a terrain bonus modifier. And hopefully I can do both at the same time and get them in with a leader and a terrain bonus. Number 4, get your units into positions where they will not be attacked or moved adjacent to, which will again DM them. So if you can get into positions that will keep the enemy from being able to attack you or move adjacent to your broken units, assuming that you don't rally them, they will not continually get this DM counter. And to sum up all of this, the goals of our routing units here in green, get your units into the best possible position and situation that will allow you to rally them. That is your goal for the routing phase. It isn't to rout your units away. That's the black and white rules of the game. That's not what we're trying to do during the rally phase. Even though it's the rally phase, we're not worried about even though it's the routing phase, we're not trying to rout our units. What we're trying to do is get them into the best possible situation so I can rally them. Broken units do nothing for you, and all they do is help your opponent. So you want to get your units, and even though it's the routing phase, you got to think about getting these units into position where they can rally, they can become full units again, they can attack, they can move and do all the stuff that you want them to be able to do. But they won't do that when they're broken. So even though it's the routing phase, we're thinking about getting these units routed using the routing rules, but we're actually thinking about them rallying. We're thinking about getting them into positions where they're going to rally. So hopefully you'll be able to stop in next time and watch our episode where we finally get into some good examples and show you and talk about situations where we have broken units, What are we thinking about? Where should we go? What should we do? Etc., etc. And that's coming up in the next episode. So hopefully this comprehensive routing example where we actually get out of the black and white, we get out of the rule book and we start talking about what all the rules mean and how that applies to what you should be thinking about when you're routing your units. Routing your units. So be sure to step in and watch our next episode, and that'll be coming shortly. Thank you for watching this episode, and hopefully you've been able to follow along. We'll see you then.